In this episode, we're gonna be embarking on a brand new project, that being a medieval city castle. In this world, we've been building some massive newer projects, but to bring the world together, I think it's really nice to bring in a way older builds to it as well. And I've got a great spot to build it in. Right next to my bridge city, there's a little mountain range that would perfectly suit a big old castle, which would have been built here long before the rest of the kingdom. It's gonna extend all over these mountains, but today will be the very start of this project, by making the entrance area with multiple towers and housing the main walkway into the castle. Hope you enjoy. As you can see, I've already started gathering the resources. With many of my builds, I needed vast amounts of resources, mainly of the same type. In this build, however, it's gonna be a whole load of different blocks, to give a nice, varied look to the build. This makes the gathering process a bit more time consuming, but of course with stone variants and wooden elements with bricks laid on the roof will take place to give this castle its iconic medieval vibe. But to not forget, granite, andesite and maybe even diorite will take up their spots in this build for some needed color variations. Those blocks will take the main stage. For this castle, I wanted to make a more colourful fantasy look to the place. So with lots of towers and spires and differing materials, I envision a great looking city castle that has a point of interest looking from any angle. I will also add some big balconies for looking out across the landscape in the lower sections. The first best course of action is probably to outline the structure and make the placements visible. In this stage, it is easiest time to still modify the composition and make last minute replacements. Once the buildings go up, it will take far more time and be very frustrating to do. So now is the best time. I made sure to add plenty of towers, but make them in all sorts of shapes and sizes. This includes the height as well. Making differing angles and configuration also really helps to make your builds look interesting. With only the step of the layout, it has already so much detail you can envision, as you can see. And at this point, that's not even included the colors and materials of the build. And with that, the last planning block in. And it looks like a mess. Oops, likely because of the elevation, it's not really straight on the ground. I mean, it's definitely because of that. It is difficult to visualize, but you can see the shapes of the towers on the ground and the outline of the buildings going on the sides. There will be an archway between these towers here, with a wooden walkway sloping down in between this little valley. I do have the plans clear now in my head, and very soon it will become far more apparent. Also, I'm modifying the terrain just a little bit to make the build slot in a bit better by adding a stone cliff face to it. Now, as the terrain is slightly adapted, it is time to start working on the first tower. This first tower will be cylindrical in shape and have pillars extending like this up into the sky, all around this shape. Let's build up the very first tower of the castle. The tower we're building here is positioned right next to the first and at the same time main gate into the castle. Later an archway made from stone and wood will extend over the entrance attached to this first tower. Really? This build will be built up in more close-up sections, with of course not showing all the hours and hours of building, but I do want to show off more of the design and building process. Could you please let me know in the comments what you think of this new style? It doesn't change too much of course, but I'm really curious what style of editing you enjoy more. Get out, dude! Don't you dare spit at me. And with these last blocks, the first layer of the premiering tower is completed. This same design I will be building up 3 more levels upward, with each floor slightly decreasing 1 block in height to not make the build too tall, but give the design a bit of forced perspective. So let's get to building the rest of it. I just spoke about forced perspective, but I'm sure that not everyone knows what that means. That means when every floor going up, you make it slightly smaller. This gives the illusion that the building is quite a bit taller than it actually is. That's because our brains tell us that when something is further away, or in this case up, it appears smaller. Theme parks like Disneyland, for example, use this technique all the time, and it's quite effective. I do find it funny to see how our brains trick ourselves. And to finish off this first tower, I'm adding the top part of the build. This will differ quite significantly from the lower sections in design and color. I wanted the top part focused more on a wooden element and the roof a little more of color. An all grey structure would not get the vibe across I'm aiming for. Hence why I landed on the choice of spruce wood, which really complements the stone bricks very well. My other city walls and towers have the same color configuration. For the roof, I went through quite a bit of different design approaches, in color and in shaping. For the color, I went with a deep dark green color with a nice texture, which the dark prismarine perfectly encapsulates. For the peak of the roof, at first I went with just a steep point, but it looked a bit empty. Also, gables didn't really fit on a build this size, so I ended up adding a little turret near the summit of the roof to finish it all off nicely. And that is the first of the castle towers done, and I think it looks great already. I ended up slightly changing this little section of the tower, which looks a bit out of place now, but there's a good reason to it. The archway gate that I spoke about previous will attach to this place, and this is to prevent later gaps in the build. There's of course a lot more needed to make it a castle. So for the next step I will be adding this tower, I think, yes, and then build the entry archway in between for the next step. With this, first off finishing the main entrance gate itself. The second tower will have a distinctly different design to the previous one. I will be starting with the basic shape of the build first. We are adding some detailed corners to this tower to make it feel less perfectly square and keep away from a concrete looking build. In the gaps I will be adding a mix of stone, cobblestone and andesites to give the whole build a more older weathered look. And besides the windows I will also be adding little wooden structures jutting out from the stone tower. This part is meant to add a little bit of interest and a little bit more detail to the build. Also it brings in the spruce colors like on the other tower. Speaking of spruce colors, now it is time to add the roof part to this second tower as well. For now the second castle tower looks a lot slimmer in comparison, but the top wooden part will jut out just a little bit more, making the tower look a lot wider and fitting in with the other one. That said, let's finish the second tower of today's episode as well. And now the roof is going on fully as well. The roof design is similar to the other castle tower, however I didn't go with an extra turret on top on this one. This is because the small towers on the sides make enough detail for the structure to the roof. Also this time I chose the dark purple color of regular nether bricks as the roof tile color accent. And I think that really works well together with the deep dark green color of the opposite tower. And there it is, the second tower is now also fully completed. As you can see, the two towers do match in color, but are very disjointed for now. Hence why I will be constructing an archway stretching in between. As you can see, the castle towers aren't completely straightly aligned to the grid. This is because I planned on adding a diagonal bridge in between these two. And I think that will make these two separate builds part of one build. Let's construct that archway. See you in a bit. And there's the archway fully built. The build looks a lot more connected now, probably because it is. This little arch entry with a slightly lighter color compared to the rest adds a lot and gives up the vibe that I'm going for. Eventually there will also be a walkway underneath here into the castle. But first I think we'll be adding a little viewing platform with a pergola and the first side building next to it. So let's get to building that. Viewing platforms like these will be more common on this castle. They were mainly inspired by the most beautiful castle Neuschwanstein, and it surprised me it had viewing platforms on a castle. Now, I do know that that specific castle was never really meant for defense, and just a powerful leader's wet dream to have a bigger and better castle. But it is so gorgeous I had to give a little nod to it. May build an inspired version of Neuschwanstein elsewhere in my world. Also, I decided on adding this little pergola, if that is what this thing is called. It's not quite a gazebo, but a little sheltered place to look out and stand here looking out for invaders. Though this side of the castle is now facing towards the kingdom in a city, and so it has become obsolete, and for now more of a relaxation spot on the castle. Of course, in case of last resort, when the main kingdom is ran over by enemies, this could be the last hold for the city. Although, I think if my massive city walls don't stop you, this castle doesn't stand too much of a chance either. Moving on with the builds, I'm now adding some side buildings to the castle tower. Some inspiration for the layout was taken from Brand Castle, which probably doesn't really ring a bell. It is however also known as Dracula's Castle. My color and tower design will vary a lot to that one. However, the inspiration I took was not just about completely filling the outer walls with tower and wall sections, but also push some houses to the outer walls as well as part of the structure itself. And I think this totally works for Minecraft as well. For the color I decided on granite and all its variants. The color really fits in nicely next to all the grey of the stone bricks, yet gives a nice contrast as well. Most castles in real life are made out of one singular color, or better said, out of one singular material. And in real life, this looks really good actually. But when in Minecraft, it just doesn't translate too well at all. Hence why I made sure to switch it up a bit for my in-game build. Keeping a theme and style is perfectly fine, but with flat walls without color difference and detail may just end up looking boring. That's probably why many people that are building in Minecraft use texturing and weathering features. And I personally use it sometimes as well, but I never want to rely solely on that technique for my builds too much. And that is great looking next to the tower. This already balances it out far better. But on the right side of the build, or I guess the east side of the castle, it will not extend any further eastward. In a later video I will move the castle back further, however, more towards the city bridge. But now let's focus on the other side of the entrance gate as well, because there I will be adding pretty much the same kind of building to balance it all out even more. As you can see, this side will host a bigger version compared to the last one. Material and design will remain the same, but for this one a slightly more tricky layout. As you can probably already tell, it is being built slightly on an angle. It adds a bit more difficulty to constructing it all, especially when it comes to the roof section. I decided on a slight angle, just like with the entrance arch, to add a little more shaping to the build. Castles in real life are usually built on hills for defensive purposes, and so will mine be. But with that, the shaping of the towers, walls and buildings need to adapt to the landscape it's sitting in and follow the contours of the land. Of course, in Minecraft you can easily move mountains, and I have done that countless times before. But to give a realistic feeling to the build, I will mostly stick to the contours of the landscape I was given. Not only does that save a lot of time I don't have to spend on terraforming, but it also makes it look a whole lot more realistic and interesting. And with that, the second building is also finished, looking identical in style and color, but its shaping and placement make it varied enough. Also, you can see I blocked out some walls to the left of it. This is because I wanted to know how much of the granite building would actually be on display, as to not add wall sections that will be covered up later. Of course, the cobble and andesite won't stay like this. This is the method I use to plan out builds without spending too much time on it. This build is already really coming together nicely, and I think we're in good shape already. Even though I have been struggling with the semi-diagonal roof for the last hour, but anyway. To add a lot to the overall composition, I will be adding a small tower in front and a higher one in the back as well. Also finishing this part of the build with cobblestone and andesite. Later adding vegetation and a walkway. But then we're pretty close to finishing this entire section. The towers I'm putting into the build now will have a more simplistic and less eccentric look to them. This is certainly not laziness, but it is definitely on purpose. When constructing a composition of a building, it is important to also add some filler buildings mixed in. If you would make every tower or section filled with details and interest, it will quickly start looking cluttered and your eyes wouldn't know where to focus at. These towers do, however, have a very important function. That is to add an interesting shape to the skyline look of the build. They won't stand out on the first look, but would definitely feel missing when left out. This castle will have more textured walls to them, to make a very obvious distinction between old and new. I imagine this castle was there long before the rest of the kingdom itself, and it should represent that. Normally, I don't often build with weathered textures, preferring to go with a more cleaner look, but I think it works perfectly for a build of this kind. Now adding some little detail to these two towers to not have them too plain and boring. And with those small additions like windows, extensions and the roofs up top, these two towers are simple but nicely finished. And those two last additions are the final major buildings for this section of the build. Now the configuration and mainly the composition is on full display. The thing I like most is that there are multiple angles of looking at the build that give a great view. This build doesn't force you to look only from one perspective. Although the smaller towers aren't anything that special, they do add a lot in the finished result. Also, I added a little side section where previously I only added andesite and cobblestone. And I think this little setback part is lovely now as well. I went with a slightly different color palette on the roof to give it a little more variation. I also brought back the spruce color like I used in the rest of the build. The last two things to do for this entrance area is a wooden bridge sloping upwards leading into the castle's main gate and adding a bit of vegetation around to add some much needed color and nature. With that making it look all pretty and nice. Let's get to building those final two steps and then I will show you the final results with shaders and all things pretty. I decided to add a wooden bridge leading into the castle. Why didn't I just set it in stone? There's a good reason for that. I imagine the surroundings of the castle have changed quite a bit since the rest of the city was built around. So the older bridge that was there before has been demolished by now. To still enter the castle, a new slightly flimsy bridge was put in place to still let people enter and live inside the castle. No heavy artillery or lots of horse traffic will happen on this bridge anymore. That's why a wooden bridge would still suffice. And that is it, today's build is successfully completed. This video marks a slightly new style of video making for me, and I would really love to hear what you thought of this build. Walking up this wooden bridge, which is supposed to look a bit more flimsy, you can already get a good look on the entrance area of the castle. Of course, looking under the archway it is very empty still, but this will definitely change when the rest of the castle is built. You can see the small amount of vegetation already adds to the building. It looks like it has been slotted in the landscape for quite some time now, and that is the look I was going for. I went for a balanced approach with towers, wall sections and buildings all mixed together to give a varied and more interesting looking castle. I also made sure you can now walk up each tower to get to the top section and look out for foreign invaders as it used to be used. In the bigger of the two granite buildings, I also managed to create a small interior with some beds and shelves to just give it a bit more life. The back of the build still needs some love, but that is yet to come. And I think that brings us to the end of the episode. I want to thank you very much for watching. Please do let me know what you thought in the comments and by leaving a like if you think this video deserved it. But thank you for watching and have a nice day.